Today, we're going to be doing a full album review to Kid Cudi's new album called Entergalactic. So let's jump into this, bro. Let's go into the artist performance. How do you feel like Kid Cudi did on this album? And where do you feel as if, he strived? And where do you feel as if maybe he could work on some things for the next album that's coming
Very
through?
interesting album. I mean, he's been teasing this for the longest time. And when it comes to the artist performance, I feel like he really embraces his own strengths as a vocalist.
That's
and
facts.
You see that through the humming, which is kind of the most popular way that he ends up starting off most of these songs. And we know that he's like the best fucking hummer in the game. So it's cool to see that he blessed us with so many of those kinds of performances throughout this album. So I think that was a highlight for me, especially on a song like In Love, where he's really making it sound very loud. It kind of takes center stage on that track. Apart from that, I think that, Cudi also strives within his hooks. When you're looking at songs, for example, like New Mode, if you're looking at songs like Angel.
Even Do What I Want has a fantastic, hook as well. And that was something that I wanted to bring into the artist performance today that I thought he did really well, was taking these signature Cudi hooks that really sound good for the majority of the track list. Like, I don't find going through any of the, the songs on this album where I was like, okay, that was a bit of a weak hook, or that doesn't sound too catchy, or it sounds out of place. I actually really enjoyed it. And if you go through most of the song structures on this album, like example, like something like New Mode or Do What I Want, the hooks on most of the album take up a majority of the actual songwriting itself, so they had to be strong, or automatically I feel as if the artist performance would have been a bit down for me. But the thing I will say about this is, like, it doesn't feel like an upgrade off of Man of the Moon 3, but it still feels really standard for what Kid Cudi's going to bring to us.
In the performance
I can't find any flaws. It's just that, like, there's no really upgrading at this point. Like, you're not going to have Kid Cudi dropping a Man of the Moon at any sort of, time. And I feel like maybe it could have taken more risks in certain areas because, yes, the humming's nice, but I would have maybe liked to see something more dynamic.
I think where he does fall short is when it comes to the rapping performances, to be honest with you, bro. Like, when I go to a song like Do What I Want, for example, I love the braggadocious cadence that he has throughout it, but if you pay attention, his flow gets exhausting just because he has the same rhythmic timing for both verses and the hook on that song. Stays consistent all throughout, and it kind of gets a bit too repetitive.
Yeah, another rapping performance that I didn't quite enjoy was actually on Can't Believe It with 2 Chainz. The first verse, it sounded a bit off.
Sounds like grime. It sounds like UK grime a bit in terms of its style.
Not only that, but I feel like, as we were talking about, the thing that you're going to get out of this performance the most from him is that humming, is the harmonizing, is those really nice catchy melodies that Kid Cudi is perfect for. But then you get these certain rap performances within the album, like example on something like Can't Believe It, then kind of has like an offsetting mood to the rest of the track list, where you're kind of like, okay, that could have not been included. But still, it wasn't, bad to the point where I was like, fuck, this is unlistenable. I never got to that point with any of the rapping performances. But overall, how do you think Cudi did on this album?
Overall, I think that we're going to give it a great score. I think that, like we said, he really strived when it came to those love ballads on songs like Willing to Trust, or songs like Living My Truth, where his harmonies are airy. They're kind of spaced out, and he has time to kind of extend
atmospheric
them.
too.
Absolutely. So I think it was great in terms of his performance. But let's now move on to the content of this album. And this is very interesting just because Kid Cudi actually said in an interview that a lot of these songs are written from the perspective of Jabari, which is actually the character that he portrays in his new animated series. And that's kind of one gripe that I have with this album, is that he said that it wasn't a soundtrack album and that it was actually its own separate album. But in reality, even looking at the fucking album cover, bro, it says Season 1. You listen to the music and you're like, I feel like this is probably meant to accompany visuals. So I feel like it is a soundtrack album. And what's cool to know is that, Cudi is someone who's often relied on his own experiences, but now he kind of had to use his own imagination to create a very loose, love-centric story, I would say.
Yeah, and listen, the thing is that I feel like with this album, a lot of the performances that he gives you is, again, like based off those harmonies and that humming. So there's not too much place on this album for him to develop any characters or to develop these really tight-knit, woven-in concepts. And
which is what was expected, though. In terms of developing that character, if you're talking from a character's perspective for the majority of an album, which this is something else that I don't like. On a song, for example, like Living My Truth, he speaks about his own experiences and actually has the most profound and touching lyric where he talks about his father watching over him from the heavens above.
It was a beautiful
It was beautiful,
yeah,
but
beautiful, right?
It totally, made the track list lose focus because he got away from the character at that point. You know what I mean?
I know. When you want to look at it from a technical standpoint, yes, obviously, it does take away from the theme itself. But I was a fan of that writing itself. That was good for me. And you guys are going to see that this sort of romantic pursuit that, Kid Cudi's character is portraying within the album, there's development within it. So he ends up, I guess, finding her on something, I believe.
Angel?
It's around Angel, Ignite the Love. And then after that, In Love is when he fully makes that transition and commitment. And you're going to be able to find certain writing styles that, really portray that well. And then once you start getting towards, like, I believe it was Somewhere to Fly, which is more towards the later half of the track list, that's where, like, it comes full circle and he ends up finally, going off in the sunset with her. So how do you feel like that was executed on as well? Because I find, like, it was woven in, it just wasn't properly done, to be honest with you.
To me, the lyrics are shallow. They're uninteresting, to be honest with you. And I feel like he paints this narrative of a basic love story that has these love tales that can kind of apply to anyone, in the sense that by the end of the album, you don't really know who this character is. And that was kind of a major issue for me going through this track list. Not only that, but some of the lyrics, like, I feel like he lacks that romantic charm that you would need to carry out this kind of a love album. For example, Kiss You Soft While I Stroke It on the song My Drug. Ooh, I Need Your Body. Let Me Have You, Please.
There's definitely some of those howlers.
I think the writing could have definitely been better, but at the end of the day, it is cool to see him add commentary on modern day relationships, just because this album kind of feels like a fantasy land. It feels like finding your soulmate is kind of this pipe dream that's unrealistic, just because of, going through the writing and the whole talk about her being an angel and coming from the heavens. It's almost as if this is a dream and it's not reality. So,
and I mean, but what was also cool about this album is, like, it's one of the first times where you find Kid Cudi, trying to go in from the third person and, like, trying to, portray someone else. So I found that interesting and risky. I just don't think it was executed upon well enough, in my opinion, at least. So I think the content was mid, to be honest with you. The writing's not that great, and I think his artist performance, like, the singing, the humming, and the harmonizing was much better. But let's go into the features, because he had a much different feature list, for Man on the Moon 3, his previous release. And what's interesting about this is that you're only going to get a handful of people on here. There's Ty Dolla $ign, there's Don Toliver, and then after that, there's 2 Chainz. So what's interesting about that is you have 2 fantastic vocalists in Ty Dolla $ign and in Don Toliver, and then you get a pure rapper and someone like 2 Chainz coming on for a song like Can't Believe It, which I felt like was kind of out of place for the track list, but he still had a great verse towards the end of it. It was really energetic, it was focused, and it was passionate. But I will say this, I think the best performance for me on this so far was probably Don Toliver on Somewhere to Fly. I think that was my favorite performance. I believe he had a part of the chorus. Yes, he did. And then after that, he also had a second verse.
He is killing every single feature that he's been doing lately. And ever since Moon came out, I was hoping that Cudi and Don Toliver would do more work together. And both of his features on this album were pretty solid. And I just love the way that their voices clash together, just because they're both so unique. I feel like Cudi is more raw, whereas Don Toliver kind of sounds a bit more synthetic within his auto-tune.
Yeah, a bit more angelic, a lot more cleaner vocals.
My favorite feature, though, has to be Ty Dolla $ign on the song Willing to Trust.
That's one of my favorite songs.
Amazing tag team moment. Like, the moment that Cudi kind of passes the mic to Ty Dolla $ign, it's the best fucking transition on the album. Not only that, but Ty Dolla $ign steals the show there, comes in with these ethereal melodies, and it's just perfection. And I also like Ty Dolla $ign's other contribution, which was kind of more minimal. He just kind of came in for the outro. But speaking about 2 Chainz, he did his thing too. Came in with some lavish bars, a lot of energy. Do you think the features were necessary, or do you think Cudi could have carried this track list on his own?
I think he could have used more, to be honest.
Really, he could have used more.
Yeah, because I feel like in a certain part of the album there was a bit of pacing issues with me, and a lot of these songs are gonna feel a bit longer because they're slower tempo, and a couple of more features would have maybe been nice. Like, if you have more of a romantic setting for this, maybe getting someone like Brent Faiyaz in here would have been super cool to see. Some other people, but I mean, that's just a nitpick, and that's just me having certain preferences. So listen, I think the features were good. I want to put it like that. I don't think you're gonna get anything spectacular. It's not the most star-studded, cast of features, but still they do add to the track list. But let's keep going on with this. Let's go on to the production. This is definitely the strongest part of the album, especially pairing it up with Kid Cudi's performance, because what you're going to find is that classic atmospheric, spacey vibe that you're going to get from most of his albums. But this time it feels a lot more coherent, to be honest with you. And you're going to get some subtle implement of trap drums in certain instances. You're going to get glistening keys in certain songs as well. The synths were really well done too throughout it. I'm a big fan of the way that the album started with Intergalactic theme. That was a crazy instrumental, 2 minutes long. I'm gonna have that in rotation, just that instrumental itself. But how do you feel like the production played into the storyline that Cudi was trying to put together, and did that affect the way that you listen to this album?
It's a very interesting soundscape, I'm gonna say that, and I feel like the sonic palette for this album was definitely kind of veering into an electronic soundscape. You definitely have a lot of synthesizers at play, a lot of bells, with the maintenance of those hip hop style drums. Apart from that, I think that you have also a lot of deep lying bass lines. I feel like the bass kind of had a prominent voice within this album.
Yeah.
Some of the standouts for me would have to be Willing to Trust, which is my favorite song on the entire album, and I love that soaring electric guitar that kind of comes in and out of that song. That was amazing. Also, In Love.
The keyboards, the keyboard on that fucking song was absolutely incredible.
Which one?
On In Love. I picked up on that. It was just hinted in the background. It was sprinkled throughout, and I'm like, that was so nice on the
kind
ears,
of like
bro.
80s style keys. You know what I mean?
It was really cool to hear that as well. Even on something like Ignite the Love, the guitar and drum melodies were perfect for me. I really felt like they were well executed. And as far as different producers, you could see it on this. You obviously have Dot the Genius. You have Jean-Baptiste on here. You have Skrillex on Ignite the Love with Rex Kudo and many more. So it's a diverse feature. It's a diverse cast of producers that came into this project, but yet it still feels very coherent. And I didn't expect anything else out of a Kid Cudi album, to be honest with you. You're going to find a really solid soundscape in any fucking album you want to go through from him. And I feel like this really accomplished that on my end.
Absolutely. And the song Maybe So is another great composition, more of an orchestral feeling. You have beautiful violins that come into it, and yeah, I think all the beats definitely complemented Cudi's performances. He's always had a great beat selection, and it's very similar in sound in terms of what you could kind of compare it to for Cudi's catalog. Apart from this album, I think it was a great soundscape overall.
Yeah,
I think
it was
that's
a
the
great
rating we're gonna go for.
It was a great soundscape. Not the best, but definitely up to Kid Cudi standards. But let's keep going on with this. Let's go on to the replay values. So we're coming off of like 2 years of not getting a Kid Cudi album at this point. Last one that dropped was Man in the Moon 3, still in my rotation to this day. So how do you feel like Intergalactic will stay in your rotation for the rest of the year? Is there certain songs you're taking out? How do you feel like your relationship with this album is?
It's interesting because like in the last few months I had this phase where I've been really getting back into Man in the Moon 3. I've been really enjoying that listen. And listen, it's too premature to say if I'll like this one as much as I've liked other Cudi's projects, but I don't see too much replay value out of this one. I'll be honest with you. I see myself maybe latching on to 4 to 5 songs. Not to say the other songs are weak. I just feel like a lot of them are kind of standard for Cudi. I don't feel like he maybe pushed himself as much as I would have wanted him to. And yeah, I just see myself kind of gravitating more towards some of his prior releases. But with due time, we'll have to see what ends up happening.
I think this one's going to be a sleeper for me. I feel like I might put it down after the weekend, but I'm going to end up getting back to it at a certain point, and it's going to end up sticking in my rotation. I feel like that's kind of the thing with me and all Kid Cudi albums, is it always takes time for me to digest and really understand what's going on. And listen, my most played albums from Kid Cudi are Man in the Moon 2. They are in the cut. They are the first version of Man in the Moon. But I think that this does have a lot of value to it. There's not a song on here that I feel like is bad or weak. It's just that you find certain songs that get you a bit sleepy, and there's a bit of a pacing issue with the overall album.
Like, I don't know if you remember the song Angel, but I just feel like he sounded like he had no enthusiasm on that one, and it literally kind of put me to sleep, bro. So there are moments like that, even though it's not a bad song.
Yeah, but listen, I think overall, I think the replay value is going to be good on it. I think that it won't be the album that's going to stick through my rotation the most, throughout this year, but still, I'm going to enjoy it.
And I feel like there's a lack of hits on it as well, in my opinion. Like, you don't have enough catchy hooks, in my opinion, the same way that you would have had on other Cudi albums. But let's get into our overall thoughts. I think that, for myself, when it comes to Entergalactic, I kind of want to see the bigger picture. I want to see how these songs fit in context with the animated series, just because I feel like he expands probably on the more general and basic ideas that were explored within these songs. I'd like to kind of get the backstory to them through that series. So maybe with that as a companion piece, I'll learn to enjoy the music a bit more. Apart from that, with the exception of a few rap cuts, I feel like Cudi kind of ventured away from the hip-hop aesthetic and kind of went more into psychedelic R&B, if you will. That's
Yeah.
kind of the vibe that I picked up on from this track list. Hooks are great. Love the melodies. Love the humming. We know that Cudi is an amazing vocalist, as he shows consistently to be. Apart from that, it had a narrative that was super flimsy, in my opinion. Lyrics that don't go past surface level at all. But I do think that it's a love story that's relatable enough to connect with people, but it is a weaker effort, in my opinion, from Kid Cudi. How do you feel about it?
Well, overall album, I think that I'm gonna have to give it a good score. I think that's gonna
Yeah, I
be
agree
our
with that.
yeah. The good score is definitely gonna be our overall rating for this album review. But yeah, I think it was a solid effort from Cudi. As you said, you're never gonna find him catching himself short, like when it comes to like those vocal performances and when it comes to the humming and harmonizing. He'll always have that on lock. I think the soundscape was really nice as well. Great production all throughout. The features were good. I mean, maybe you could have seen more in certain instances and more people make this track list, but hey, it was finally what ended up happening with Don Toliver, Ty Dolla $ign, and 2 Chainz. So that was a W in my opinion. And as Lou said, I just feel like when you have to go through the writing of this album, you're probably going to be left a bit disappointed. But hey, that's our review for Kid Cudi's Entergalactic. Let me know in the comment section, where do you think Lou and I fucked up? Where do you think we got it right? And how do you feel about this album? Because Kid Cudi always drops memorable projects. Final score on this is going to be good, Lou?
Absolutely. It's going to be a good score, and let us know what you guys would rate this album in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next review.